9 p.m. here, Mountain Time in Phoenix, Arizona, where we are here at NewsNOW from Fox. But like I said, we want to switch gears here and talk about immigration, talk about the issue at the southern border. There's been an influx of unaccompanied minors coming in and families as well through the southern border. So let's hear from Griff Jenkins. He's been at the border for the last couple of days with a report for us here.
Crisis as a result of President Biden's open border policies.
During his visit to the southern border, Texas Governor Greg Abbott blasted the Biden administration's immigration policies.
It invites illegal immigration and is creating a humanitarian crisis in Texas right now that will grow increasingly worse by the day.
Abbott's remarks come as the number of unaccompanied migrant children swells along the U.S.-Mexico border. The Border Patrol is reportedly holding more than 3,000 migrant children, nearly triple the number from just 2 weeks ago. That's according to new data expected to be announced this week, including that there were close to 100,000 apprehensions between port entries last month. Still, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki has denied the surge constitutes a crisis.
At this point, is this a crisis at the border?
Look, I don't think we need to sit here and put new labels on what we have already conveyed is challenging. What we have conveyed is a top priority for the president.
While the Biden administration has pledged to overhaul Trump administration policies and implement a more humane immigration system, Republicans say it's not working.
Policy has consequences. When you say that you're not going to enforce our immigration laws, when you say that you're not going to build a border wall, it has consequences. And we're seeing the tragic consequences of that right now at the border.
By law, the Border Patrol cannot keep migrant children in custody for longer than 72 hours. In Matamoros, Mexico, Griff Jenkins, Fox News.
Griff, thank you so much for that report there from the border there in Mexico. We want to go out now to a conversation that I had a little bit earlier tonight, pre-recorded, from a Wall Street Journal reporter. Her name is Michele Hackman. She covers the Department of Homeland Security, border and immigration issues as well. And so we're going to play out that conversation. It's about 15 minutes long, so we hope you enjoy that. Then we're going to play out Governor Greg Abbott's remarks from the border as well in Texas today. So here's that conversation. Joined by Michele Hackman. She covers the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration, and Border Issues for the Wall Street Journal. Michele, thank you so much for being with us on NewsNOW tonight.
Thanks for having me.
My first question, though, kind of walk us through what is happening at the border, the southern border right now, and how might it be different from what we saw in 2017 and 2018?
Yeah, so what you're seeing now is a growing number of unaccompanied children. That's, people under the age of 18 and children traveling with their families, with their parents, arriving at the border in sort of bigger and bigger numbers. It's been increasing probably since the summer. And so it's not, an only Biden administration phenomenon, but it has grown pretty dramatically in the last couple months. And we think that's because across Latin America, particularly Central America, people are hearing there's a new guy in town, he's kind of nicer to migrants than the last guy, and so now might be a good time to come.
I see. And let's talk about the numbers of these unaccompanied minors. Today at the White House press briefing, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was very reluctant to go into the number itself and how it has, from the reports that I've seen, either doubled or tripled in the last 2 weeks, and she referred all those questions to DHS. So why isn't the Biden administration right now getting out in front of this and being a little more transparent, or are they?
I can't speak to their media strategy. I do know they tend to release the numbers of people apprehended at the border every month, and that release is, tends to come out right about now, maybe tomorrow or Thursday. They have not been confirming anything in advance. I think they probably want to obviously tell a particular story about it, but from what I know from my own reporting, from what my colleagues at other papers have reported, is that the numbers have gone up rather dramatically in the last even month, where the number of children arriving at the border unaccompanied has gone up more than 50%. The number of people crossing overall is going up. And so, you know, I think the Biden administration, and maybe we want to talk about this, is going to try to frame that in terms of what is happening in those Latin American countries that's pushing those people to come here.
And just last week, Michelle, we heard from DHS Secretary Mayorkas, who was essentially offering a message to those migrants saying, you know, don't come now. What did you make of that? And did that kind of, you know, to someone who covers this, you know, what's the plan?
Definitely very different message, right, that the Trump administration, which was trying to say, don't come ever, you know, crossing the border is a crime. I think this administration is really focused on asylum and trying to come up with a new process at the border where they feel like they can adjudicate asylum claims fairly. You know, obviously a lot of these people are fleeing pretty horrific conditions. You know, whether that means the really specific definition of political asylum is a different question. But I think eventually they want to get to this point where someone crosses the border and they can put them in a really quick asylum proceeding. You know, maybe that person has a lawyer, but they get an answer in 10 days, 20 days. And so that, I think in their eyes, that process would sort of eliminate the pull factor of people wanting to come here and asylum claims taking, you know, 4 or 5 years for you to get an answer, and maybe you wait, you work at the meantime. But in the meantime, you know, they haven't created that system yet. I think they want to. The reality is that they are actually turning away nearly every migrant at the border. They're returning them to Mexico. But the rhetoric is such that people are hearing, you know, this administration is nicer than the last one. I think they're going to give me a fair shake. I might as well try now. And so, you know, their message is just not being received.
I see. And you know, there's a legal window, isn't that right, for how long these minors can be held in these detention centers. And, you know, once that is kind of up, I believe it's 3 days maybe, are they being moved to facilities around the country?
Yes. So what happens is, you know, children, when they cross unaccompanied, there are special protections in immigration law that kick in. You know, they can't be deported quickly. They have to be turned over to sort of child welfare services. So, and that, you're right, has to happen within 3 days of them being, you know, apprehended by the Border Patrol. So within that 3-day window, they get sent to, the process is now they get sent to shelters sort of near the border where they're quarantined for about 10 days. And then they get sent to shelters sort of all over the country.
And as obviously we all know, we're living through a pandemic. That's one of the big worries is these migrants bringing in positive cases of the coronavirus. Have we seen that so far? Is that overblown?
It's somewhat overblown. I will say there were some cases, you know, in most cases, as I said, families who are crossing the border are actually being turned back to Mexico. But in some cases, obviously to do that, you need the cooperation of the Mexican government. And Mexico has just started saying no to some families, particularly families with young children. They've said, no, we're not taking them back. You have to take them. And the Biden folks have decided, you know, if we do that, then we're going to release them sort of with immigration court dates. And turns out, you know, the Border Patrol doesn't have the capacity to test those people. They don't have the money, they don't have the tests. And so they release them. And you know, about 100 over the past few months that have been released of the, you know, of the many thousand have tested positive after being released, tested positive with COVID.
I see. And this is kind of all chalked up to the former administration's remain in Mexico policy for asylum seekers. Isn't that right? And
no, those are two separate issues, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. These are migrants sort of arriving new from Mexico, Central America, Haiti, wherever it is they might be coming from.
Got you. And we can maybe go into that issue a little bit later. Let's kind of, you know, kids in cages is something we've heard so often when, you know, the Trump administration's policy of separating children from their families. Can you make the same argument that this is happening as well at the Biden administration's, you know, immigration policy too?
You know, putting the cages aside for a moment, some of the same things that immigration, you know, advocates criticized the Trump administration of doing and the Obama administration of doing, particularly opening sort of emergency child welfare shelters that are not licensed to care for kids. They tend to be sort of in really remote areas. There was one that was sort of near like a toxic waste site that they opened. the Biden administration opened one in the early days of coming into office in Carrizo Springs, Texas. And that was something where a lot of people felt like, these folks are doing exactly what they criticized the last administration of doing. Now that's, if you want to be technical about it, separate from the cages. The cages refers to a facility, a border patrol facility that the Obama administration had opened and the Trump administration used, where they kept children and families that were sort of staying in border patrol custody for a really long time because there was no shelter space to take them. And that's where you got the images of those kids actually sitting in those sort of fenced in enclosures that people called cages, because there was just no room for them anywhere else.
I see. We're being told that Biden's southern border advisor, the former U.S. ambassador to Mexico, Roberta Jacobson, she'll be briefing reporters at the White House briefing tomorrow. We were also learning of, maybe you did some reporting on this trip of Biden advisors that went down to the border to kind of report back to him to tell him what was going on. Do we have any more information on that? Because the White House was very mum on that.
Yes, they have been very mum. What we know is that a group of advisors went down to the border on Saturday. That included, Homeland Security Secretary Ali Mayorkas, Susan Rice, the domestic policy advisor, and they have come back and basically have been asked to sort of come up with a whole border strategy, and we'll be briefing the president sort of on initial steps. And that touches on things that I talked about, sort of creating a faster asylum process at the border, creating maybe a way to process asylum seekers at ports of entry so that they're not incentivized to cross the border illegally, and sort of create the system where you can COVID test before they come through that port of entry. So we don't have, again, this problem of people being released and then testing positive for COVID. So we don't have a ton of detail about all of the things they're considering, but you can expect things along those lines to sort of think about different ways to address all of these people coming.
And let's kind of extrapolate this now, Biden policy writ large, and what his plans are for immigration going forward. We know he issued a flurry of executive orders kind of in the first few weeks after he was sworn in on immigration, and even proposed legislation kind of outlining this 8 to 10 year path towards citizenship for almost every undocumented immigrant here in the U.S. What are some of the ones and reforms that you're following?
Yeah, I think the path to citizenship you mentioned is a big one. I don't think we'll see Congress pick up that bill that Biden sent to Congress that would, offer legalization to all of the 11 million. I think it is possible that we'll see a smaller bill, maybe something, to help out the dreamers, those young immigrants here, sort of without authorization. I'm also watching, the Biden administration seems really intent on changing the direction of ICE and really limiting the number of arrests of undocumented immigrants, deportations. And I think that's going to really lead to a culture clash at that agency. I think you'll see a lot of more conservative states object to that, because it just effectively does allow a lot more people to live in the country.
I see. And also one of their main goals is to, for legal immigration, is to up the people, refugees that are allowed to come into the United States on a given year-to-year basis, up from the Trump administration's numbers, which were historically low. What are some of the other kind of reforms and proposals that you'll be looking at as well? Because it seems like this crisis is deepening, and so maybe we'll see some more movement on those.
Yeah, I think, it's funny you say that, because I think as we see more activity at the border, it's going to sort of distract the administration from all the other things that it would like to do. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it will definitely dominate. Today, we saw the Biden administration dismiss some appeals against one of the Trump administration's sort of signature policies, the public charge rule. And that basically served as a sort of wealth test for people applying for permanent residence, for green cards. The Trump folks, they argued that that was a good thing. That was kind of like creating a merit-based immigration system where you're only sort of allowing people to immigrate or to stay permanently if they, merited it, if they had enough points, if they, had a good job or had a high income or spoke good English. And the Biden folks obviously really hated that. They felt like that really excluded or discriminated against people who were poor or maybe come from different parts of the world. So I think that's one thing. And you'll see tons of other changes in how, you know, the Biden folks approach just allowing more immigrants into the country. As you said, through the refugee program, they want to raise that to about 125,000 a year, even just through family-based immigration or working with companies to sort of bring in more immigrants. I think we'll see all of those things.
All right, anything you'd like to add just as this kind of is being reported more and more in the media about the situation at the border? What will you be watching for in the days ahead?
You know, I think the question I'm really interested in is how the Biden administration sort of sticks to its promises. It says it wants to sort of come up with a totally new immigration system. I think tomorrow we'll see Ambassador Jacobson at the White House talk about how they want to address root causes, their term, the push factors. Those are, you know, the poverty, the violence in Central America that make people leave. They want to sort of remake the asylum system in the United States to, you know, in their words, make it fairer, but also sort of make it faster. So they eliminate that pull factor of people waiting, you know, 4, 5, 6 years to get their asylum decision. But I think a lot of those reforms take time. And I just wonder if they're going to be able to do that, given the growing political pressure about what's happening at the border and all the people coming.
And we'll be watching it here on NewsNOW from Fox for sure. Michele Hackman from the Wall Street Journal, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Speak to you again. All right, really interesting conversation there. Hope you enjoyed that, just about what the Biden administration's policies are going forward on how to tackle this emerging crisis at the southern border, with thousands of unaccompanied minors streaming through these entry points at the border, but these natural kind of borders that we have down there. And so you're hearing from a number of different people in the administration about what's being done to combat this. And a lot of Republicans are not happy. They would prefer the former president's immigration policies, no doubt about that. And speaking of Republican officials, let's hear now from Governor Greg Abbott from the state of Texas. He was at one of the border crossings in Texas today, flanked by his border officials there in the state, saying that he needs more federal help to stem the tide of these immigrants that are coming over. So let's listen into this. This is about 20 minutes long, and then we got a